Hey, everybody, this is your boy John with the Geeks from the Multiverse podcast. And today's episode, we're going to be talking about stigmas and everything to do with societal values based on stigmas themselves, and hopefully kind of dive deeper into how you can create a better narrative for what we're going to be talking about today. So stay tuned. You know, I was going to say to everyone out there, today's actually a very interesting episode. So, this is going to be our first time actually going to be explicit. So, we mentioned this before that we were going to try to sound more natural because, we've been trying to do things a little bit differently. We're trying to keep the PG, but at the same time, it doesn't always work.
Yeah, it's trying to explain certain things and trying to be more natural. It just doesn't work when we're trying to make things a little bit more, I guess, politically correct. I don't know if that's the right terminology, John, but
Well,
we're
yeah.
trying to explain certain things, and at the same time, we're trying to make them sound, more entertaining or more funny. But the way that it comes out and the way that we have to navigate the censorship of maintaining that clean rating isn't always easy.
Right. And I mean, being explicit doesn't always mean that we have to swear, right? I mean, occasionally, of course, I'm going to probably do it, and of course, Matt's going to do it. But at the end of the day, it's just so that you're aware. So, like when we're recording and we're doing these things, you know, if your kids listen, just keep in mind, it's
Right.
that your parental kind of censorship that you want to make sure that okay, maybe what, maybe they're doing a little too much of this today. Maybe I shouldn't really have them listen to this particular one, or whatever it may be, right? Because I mean, we might make little jokes here and there, but again, we're not making this a only explicit show, because I mean, we're trying to again create that content, make that valuable information for you guys.
Yeah, and it's like John said, every episode, like we're not gonna be Samuel L. Jackson swearing. It might be content that might not be appropriate. Um, so we're definitely going to maintain the same level of geekiness that we always have, but we want to be more natural to who we are.
Right, and also have some flair and a little bit of a twist, right?
Yeah.
Because we're just trying to be ourselves. But let's dive in, Matt. These fucking stigmas, man. I mean, I swear, why is it that as a society we have to? It's like almost we put them on a pedestal in some ways, and it feels like that is the values that we have to live off by. But like we can't be different. It has to be this or that.
Yeah, I mean, I think automatically when something is different, as a society, like we just tend to automatically like freaking alienate it. Like it's automatically separate. Like, oh, you're not like everything else.
Right, and it's like you're basically being a part of like a cookie cutter, like kind of you know put in a little box and say, "Here you go. Like this is what you're supposed to be." Why can't we be like individuals and be different in our own rights? Because that's kind of what stigma drives. It's like everyone is either somehow connected to this one thing, but it's not always the case, depending on who you are.
No, and at the end of the day, sometimes it's like, why can't people just mind their own freaking business? Like, and
No, no, no. It's okay,
like
man. It's okay.
seriously, like sometimes seriously, like with stigma and what we're talking about, like regarding addiction, mental health, but it goes beyond those because there's so much more than. I mean, obviously, mental health and addiction are the two biggest
Well,
areas, but like
yeah,
people that are overweight, people, like geeks and nerds and all, that community, like
yeah.
when you talk about those, like you have people that just don't mind their own business and have nothing better to do but to
Open their damn mouth and they don't know how to shut up.
right. Then they automatically just like devalue and they make these judgments based on what they're seeing or what they're hearing, and instead of actually taking the time maybe to, I don't know, ask a freaking question, they don't even bother and they just make these judgments, and that's how these stigmas are created.
Well, you know, for example, right? So, like, I know we're both geeks, right? We're both in our own ways. We have geeks and kind of nerdy like tendencies, depending on what we're talking about, right? So, like, when you look at a geek, right, or let's say someone who's addicted to, let's say, alcohol, right? People have this like weird kind of conceptualized version of what they should look like, or how they should act, or how they need to be dressed or all these different little things. And it's like a geek can be anybody. And also
Right.
an addict can be literally anybody. And that there's no right or wrong answer to what it is defined as, you know. But we're gonna go into this. Like, what is a stigma? Right. So a stigma refers to the discrediting, devaluing, and shaming of a person because of characteristics or attributes that they possess. Okay, so if someone, if like for example, is suffering from a mental health condition, an addiction, a medical condition, genetic or genetic disorder, like things like that. It's they're saying that, hey, you know what, you should be ashamed of what you have. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can change. So if like someone's an addict, okay, you unfortunately your parents or family members might have an addictive quality, and you might have caught that from them, or vice versa. So really, and it doesn't even have to need to start with them. You could just have it on your own, and you could eventually even create that addictive quality to then, let's say, pass it on to your children.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't matter. But like we're putting them in a box, and they're like, hey, you know what? This is what it is. This is what you need to act like, and now you need to be shame of it. And it's like, no, man. Like, okay, I might be addicted to gambling, but yeah, okay, maybe I am ashamed of it because it's caused so much stress in my life. But I'm now trying to figure out maybe a different way to, approach my life and hopefully maybe get help. But then everyone's like, oh, you're an addict or you're a gambler. You shouldn't be around my kids, or you shouldn't be like, no, like that's not the right answer.
Yeah, and it's one of those things like when you're, and I've seen them occasionally driving around, the city, Manchester that I
Uh,
live in,
oh yeah,
where you're driving around and then you see this like random person, you know, dancing on the side of the road,
yeah.
and you instantly look at them and you make this like snap judgment, like one, either they're high as shit or they're crazy as shit.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, yeah.
It's that stigma though that like I'm not obviously going to like pull over, park, and get out and go, "Hey, what's your issue, bro?" But like somebody probably, if I really had an issue with it, like that should be what happens. Is like, are you okay? Like, do you need something? Like, instead of just making that snap judgment, like, oh, that dude's like off his rocker. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
he could just be having a really, really good day, and like maybe he's listening to some really awesome music and decided like he's gonna stop and dance right this side of the street.
no, and
I have no idea.
I agree with you. I mean, it can be a whole slew of things. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be like someone that's high or someone that needs to just, have a weird, psychotic tick or something like that and needs to go randomly out in the street and start dancing. But like at the end of the day, it's like, you unfortunately, yes, we are quick to judge. We are quick to say like, hey, this person is high, so then that's probably why they're doing it, instead of just thinking, okay, maybe this person had a great day at work. Maybe they got a promotion, they got
Right.
something,
Yeah.
and they're dancing because they're like, oh my God, like this is going to change my life. Like this is amazing. But we don't think like that. We have to
No,
use these
no.
stigmas.
Yeah, and we definitely, I mean, society definitely doesn't think that way. And there's I've seen stories, and I don't know like how true they were, but there was one particular one about a church pastor. He was, I think, recently had gotten a job at this church and decided like he was going to kind of give himself that like homeless man kind of look.
Ah, okay,
So
little
he
social experiment.
he you know did this beard and the long hair, got it like really grungy clothes, and did the whole get up. He showed up for weeks, not just one time. Like he showed up for weeks, sat in the back. Nobody even talked to him. Nobody said hi. Like nobody greeted him. Like nothing. And he decided like, okay, let's flip the script. I'm gonna shave, I'm gonna clean myself up, I'm gonna dress like really nicely. I don't think anybody at the church knew that he was taking over as a pastor.
Ah,
So
okay.
he got all out, all dressed up nice. Like, I think he was gonna show up with the intention of like going to the front to be introduced as their new pastor.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
And when he arrived, he was greeted. He was given like, their churches like, usually they give you like a welcome gift or whatever. So
Yeah,
he
like
he was
something,
given
yeah.
like the welcome gift, and like everybody was, greeting him and saying hello. They introduced him, and then he went into like, I've actually been coming here for over a month. None of you said anything to me. And he showed pictures of him, sleeping out front of the church,
Right.
and different, different pictures that, selfies that he took where he was like standing next to people that were with the church, and nobody said anything to him until he cleaned himself up. And it's just that idea of like, it wasn't until he cleaned himself up that people started actually saying like hello and started talking to him, but they weren't when he was dirty and homeless.
And that's that stigma, right? It's the whole like you need to be like well kept. You don't need to be, yeah, you know, dirty, nasty, grungy. All these little things that when we talk about going to church and things like that. It's not about who the person looks like or how they dress or how they maybe interact with people. It should be like, hey, welcome in. What do you need from us? Like, how can we help you?
That's
Kind of a
certainly
deal.
what we would hope it would be.
Right. We would think
But
that, but like
in this
society is not the case.
instance, like, he was actually taking over as the pastor, and he, when he did the social experiment, he wanted to see what, you know, this church body was going to be like before they knew that he was going to be like their pastor. And obviously he wasn't impressed.
No, I wouldn't be either if I was the pastor. I mean, I'd be like, really? Like this is the new, congregation I'm going to be a part of now. Like, how am I going to, want to be leading these people if they're not even wanting to, let's say, help lead
Associate, yeah.
or lead or associate or whatever to someone like him in this
Yeah.
case because of this experiment. I mean, I would fully agree if he didn't want to be the pastor now just because of that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know how things turned out afterwards because the article I read was a while ago. But I would be guessing that like, if he did indeed continue the pastoring this church, that he probably would have, you know did a whole 180 turn to remedy that situation where you have to be more welcoming to anybody who comes in, no matter what they look like, what they smell like, what their situation is. Like, you have to remove that stigma, because all you're doing is like spreading the stigma of like, yeah, if you're homeless, like, we're not going to talk to you. That, like, that's just what it is.
I also think that, it really sets that tone and it also sets the body language of how people want to react to, others besides even being homelessness. I mean, let's say, for example, I mean, I hate saying it, but let's say somebody's drunk and they walk right in and maybe they did want to go in and do that, but like, I guess in this case, it might be a safety concern, right? But so it may, kind of go both ways, but you know, you really shouldn't judge a book by its cover unless you understand what this person's intent actually is
Yeah.
by getting to know them and understanding what it is that they're doing.
And if somebody actually did talk to him, that might have actually changed the narrative, I think, where he might have actually said, like, hey, I'm actually your church pastor, but nobody did anything. I think that would have changed the narrative if they actually did greet him and they actually were welcoming. Like, that would have actually changed the narrative where he didn't like feel that stigma of like, well, they just think I'm homeless, so I'm not welcome here.
Well, right. I mean, now, let's flip some switches here, but like, you look at like addiction or even mental health, right? So like even just mentioning like an alcoholic, right? So there's plenty of unfortunately, I know quite a few, people that probably are very much easily functioning alcoholics or and maybe I hate saying it, but like let's say Coke or or something like that, right? So like there's so many things that we don't know as societies. Like we might think that Jimbo over here is a great guy. He's dressed all nice, but this guy's doing let's say I don't know 10 grams of Coke a night. I mean, that's probably a lot. I don't really know because I don't do drugs. But what I'm
Dang,
saying is,
Jimbo.
like you wouldn't know that, but you're okay with him being in the same presence as you. But let's say an alcoholic who's got some grungy clothes, kind of dresses a little dirty, does all these other things. You're like, oh, he stinks of let's say whiskey or beer or whatever, and you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm all set. Like I don't want to deal with you. I have no desire to even be in the same presence as you.
Yeah.
But you don't know who he is. Maybe he's a let's say a famous actor or scientist or something like that, and you have no idea what this guy's life is about or even know anything to, I don't know, just start judging him for what it was because you don't know what happened. Maybe he had a bad day at work. Maybe his wife left him. I don't know. There's so many things that could have happened in the situation.
Well, and that's a problem with society now, and this whole idea of stigma that, like, even with Jimbo or, Jim Bob or whoever else that we're talking about
Yeah.
here, like whether we're talking about an alcoholic or we're talking about, an addict who's addicted to, cocaine or an opiate or something else,
Right.
as soon as society learns, like, oh, you're an addict, like, it's just that mentality of like, well, if you're an addict, then you're always going to be an addict. Like, there's nothing that you can do to change that.
Right. You're a loser. You're a junkie. You don't.
All you know is using. Like, that's all you're gonna do.
Right. And there's no point of changing because that's all you know. But that's not, and that's the
Yeah,
problem. People don't just say, "Hey, you know what? I'm just going to become a drug addict overnight." It doesn't just take like that. It takes multiple things to start going into that realm. There's multiple things of why you'd want to start something. So, like, for example, right? I mean, unfortunately, like with our veteran, population, a lot of times it's due to like, let's say, back injuries or some kind of related injury that is causing pain, right? And then they unfortunately get prescribed like Percocets or Vicodin or something like that, and then they go into that, and then they can't get it anymore. And then unfortunately, they look at going into heroin and other harder
right.
substances. So it's that downward spiral, but it's like again, we just judge on, the outside appearance, what they look like, the mentality they might have, like let's say the way they talk, like whatever. I mean, there's so many things and it disgusts me like that we just say, you know what? Because you look this way, because you act this way, because blah blah blah, because the key word is because here. It doesn't mean that that is the case.
Right. And it's just the stigma that society does put on. It's not just addiction, but it's mental health too. Like, it's the permanence of the phrases like, they'll never get sober. You know, you can never trust an addict. Like, they'll sell their children just to get high. And I'm sure that there are instances where that's true. I mean, in the past year, I mean, we've seen at least what, two families that did horrible things to their kid.
Yeah.
And yes, so there are situations where that does occur. But two out of, I mean, how many people are addicted to drugs in New Hampshire?
No, I mean, I don't know the exact number, but I know there's plenty.
Thousands, I would say, at least.
Yeah.
And it's not a huge percentage. I mean, are there probably more? There's probably more, but
I mean, think about like when we were working right at that facility, right? It a lot of times both him and I would talk about like what is your purpose? Like what is that thing you're wanting to fight for? Right? So like a lot of people might say, okay, my family, my kids, my dog, whatever, right? But really at the end of the day, it's if they're wanting to change and that's where that support system comes into play. So if they don't have that, yes, they're gonna feel shame. They're gonna feel the judgment,
yeah.
the disgrace, like all this stuff. And so, with this stigma, it doesn't help when people start adding that negative like connotation with those words to them. So like junkie, loser, whatever. And it makes it harder for them to really want to get help and to, get that
Well,
treatment.
because it puts that type of, personality type, or it defines really like who they are. So like, when that stigma is in play, it's really like, once an addict, always an addict. Like, oh, you're just going to be a junkie. And once those things are it's friends and family that are more likely to use this. It's not going to always, always just be somebody like, you see in a grocery store, or it's generally going to be like your friends or family, like,
Right.
you're just an addict. Why don't you just go get high again? Yeah, that's what you're going to do anyways. And that's what's like the stigma is, because it's going to make that person who is addicted like, well, why should I go for treatment? I'm just an addict. If I'm going to always be an addict, then why bother?
Right. Or like even the mental health side of things, it's like, if you're, let's say, bipolar or, schizophrenic or whatever the case is, right? I mean, those are unfortunately ones that are very hard to control.
Right.
I mean, yes, there's medication that people would take and do all that to kind of control the symptoms and certain things, but like, you know, in some ways, yes, you can control it, but it's really having the, kind of that willpower, that determination to be like, you know what, okay, yes, you know what, I'm labeled as this, but it does not mean it defines my life. Just like in any situation, it does not mean that defines you. And so, whether you're an addict, whether you're, a mental health case, like whatever case it really is, but it doesn't matter, right? Because at the end of the day, you are the one that can control that piece. And unfortunately, with others, it's basically kind of pushing that, narrative to be like, you know what, I don't need to listen to this. I just need to focus on myself.
Yeah. Um, so stigmas too can like it makes them also feel like, because like I said before, like it will typically, unfortunately, like come from friends and family. So I think in terms of stigma, it does make somebody who's an addict or somebody suffering from mental health or other, other things like
Right.
being a geek or whatever, when your friends or your family don't really support, what you're doing or what your mental health condition is, it makes you feel like you can't turn to them. And that's one of the like unfortunate things, because when you feel like you can't turn to them because you're fearing their judgment, it's like, who do you turn to? There's like kind of no one at that point where you can actually turn to.
Right. And hopefully, when you're, in like, let's say, for example, like, so with Matt and I, right? As friends, right? So we hope that, of course, that we would be able to trust and support one another no matter what it would be. But of course, there may be things that I might like that he doesn't like and vice versa, but that doesn't mean I'm going to, judge on what he's doing because I have no room to talk. Right. But a lot of people think they have all this, surprising ability to be like, oh, I have all the room to talk. And you're like, no, you don't. You actually have a lot more issues than I would have ever thought. But then people are like, whatever, I don't care. And it's like, no, like that's not the right answer. And unfortunately, until you maybe figure out what is going on with you, maybe you should really talk to me about what's going on with me until you understand really what's going on,
Right.
and like even the, um, professionals, like, so for example, like, I know like hospitals and doctors and, let's say paramedics or something like that. Unfortunately, I'm going to, mention my wife here, but like, sometimes, people are like, oh, he's just another drunk, or, oh, we got another mental health, mental case, coming walking in,
Yeah.
or,
Oh, we got another, another overdose at the same address.
I mean,
Like, I get it. Like, you do have to understand that, addicts are addicts at the end of the day. You know, there once for an EMT or medical professional, just because you go there, maybe once for an overdose doesn't miraculously mean they're not going to stop being an addict. Just because they might have overdosed once, like as soon as you Narcan somebody, they're immediately going to seek that next thing, like the thing that's going to make them high again, because what Narcan has basically done is it has removed every opiate from their system. So now they're going to look at putting all that opiate right back in.
no, I mean, it's the vicious cycle. It's the,
Yeah.
when you and I were talking about it in our addiction episode, it's the truth. Like, unfortunately, you're set in one way. That's all you know. And so, like, you know, hopefully, as professionals, as like nurses, doctors, EMTs, but whatever the case is, right? Or even police officers or firefighters, whatever, right? So at the end of the day, when you deal with a situation where there's somebody that it did overdose or is a mental case that walks in or whatever, keep in mind that you don't know where they're coming from. There's probably a slew of things, and I understand people think, oh, it's okay, the wife cheated, or they always jump to conclusions. There's always things going on. There's got to be a reason, why they're doing this, and maybe it is to get high, maybe it is because they lost their wife or husband or whatever, but you can't judge a book by its cover unless you actually know what is going on.
Right. And, like we were saying, like hospitals, doctors, medical professionals, like they're not exempt from creating stigma. You know, being in the addiction field, I've heard story after story, whether they're true or not, that's not for me to evaluate. But I've heard story after story of, individuals going to the hospital and how they were treated. And I'm obviously not going to share them here, but
No, no, of
like
course.
these stories are just awful. And it's like, wait, this was one of our local hospitals? It's like, why would they why would they do these things? Like why wouldn't they treat somebody who, is an addict the same way as say me or you?
Well, I can tell you why. I mean, they just think it's a big waste of time and it's a big waste of money. And they just think, okay, well, they're just going to continue to do it. But at the same time, you're right. It shouldn't matter whether it's me or you or
Yeah, I mean,
somebody out the
at the
street.
end of the day, people are people, and I should get treated the same way as that individual should get treated. And if I'm being completely honest here, that individual who's the addict, who probably goes to the hospital more than I do, probably has Medicaid, who probably pays 100% of all the hospital bills. That's probably better than my insurance.
That's absolutely true.
So it's one of those things, like hospitals and doctors, like they can also create that stigma, and they're not exempt from it. And it's just that idea of like we should be treating people the way they should be treated. Are there rules and regs when they go to the hospital? Of course there are. As somebody who's worked in the addiction field, addicts generally don't like rules.
No,
So
the,
when you apply those rules and say like we're going to search your room, we're going to maintain like no visitors, certain rules have to be in place. People don't like that.
yeah, well, I can tell you, don't join the military if that's the case, because there's going to be plenty of rules you're not going to like. But like, when it comes down to, like what you're saying, man, it sucks that, you look at an addict, you look at, a mental health patient, whatever the case is, and, they're not getting treated with respect and dignity as even a human being. They're getting treated
Yeah,
as with scum. Basically, they're scum of the earth and they're not, worth anyone's time. And it's like, okay, well, what if that was your sister? Or what if that was your, your brother, your dad, your uncle, your whatever, right? So what if one of them was your family member that was close to you?
that's right. Yeah.
And what, you don't wanna help them because whatever, because that's stigma? No, you should be like, "Hey, you know what? I wanna help them because if they're wanting to seek the right help, why not support them the right way and not the wrong
Yeah.
way?"
And there's so many that I've known that would absolutely refuse to go to the hospital until like their like literal leg was falling off, or like they had an infection so bad that it was like mere seconds turning septic. Like people with abscesses, like you can see it in their arm and it's pretty much eating their whole arm.
Right.
And you're like, you need to go to the hospital because that's going to turn septic. Oh, yeah, 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 I'll go.
Which
No, no,
could
no.
literally
You
kill
need to
you.
like leave here and go there.
Right. There is no reason for you to stay right here. You need to go immediately to the hospital and they need to check you out because at this point, again, like I've just said, like septic can kill you And if you don't go, then basically you're just waiting for your deathbed because you might
Yeah.
as well just go get a coffin now at that point. But I agree. It's scary that people literally will wait to the last minute to ever want to go to the
Just
hospital.
that avoid, to avoid being judged and feel like an addict when they go to the hospital, which the hospital should be like that safety zone where they can be treated with dignity, and yet they have to, have that stigma of fear going to the hospital. And health insurance is also equally as bad because certain, health insurance, like they don't adequately pay for certain, mental health costs, certain things, with addiction, um, medications. So it makes people feel like they have to go the rest of their life. Like, I'm just going to have to suffer with this bipolar because they won't cover this medication.
Right, and that's not the right answer because, like, and unfortunately, with like drug companies and everything else, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a cure for cancer right now, but they're not doing it because they want to make billions of dollars to literally keep sucking out of the the American population or even the world for that matter. I mean, they don't care. That's the problem is that they only are controlled by how much money they can make because of one drug. I mean, I know there's plenty of documentaries that even state like big companies like that. They're just like. Um, they're like, "You know what? I don't care. Like, you're right. We have a cure, but we're not gonna give it out because we know that we can get more people, to, be, relying on this one thing." So, like, look at diabetics. I mean, if you don't have insulin, you're screwed. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it probably takes maybe dollars, if that, maybe pennies or whatever to make it, but they're charging, like, hundreds of dollars for this
Hundreds of
one
dollars
thing.
for it. Yeah. And you can get it cheaper. So, if you shop around, but it's just that idea of like, I didn't cause myself. I mean, I guess some people probably have caused themselves
Well, yeah, yeah, no, in that sense, yeah.
if they ate themselves to diabetes. Um, but like for the most part, like I didn't cause myself to get diabetes, just like I wouldn't cause myself to get cancer or,
An
you know,
addiction or whatever.
fill in the blank. Um, so, when it comes down to like, you're gonna need, you know, this treatment. Okay, well, is my insurance gonna cover it?
Nope.
No, it's going to apply directly to your deductible. Well, what's my deductible? Oh, your deductible is $5,000. Oh, so I guess I'm not then.
Well,
It's
yeah,
just
you're
like
right because nobody in their right mind is like, you know what, I have,
I have $5,000 just laying around under my couch.
or yeah, or
Like,
just be
hey,
like, you know what, I'm a millionaire. Screw it, whatever. I'll just grab whatever money I have. Right, but
yeah,
like most Americans are going to be like that for that, for that particular matter or whatever,
yeah.
they decide to go do. Um, Matt, you know, we were talking about this little story you had, regarding like stigma base, and I know I've heard it, but I think
Yeah,
it'd be
yeah.
interesting for the people to listen though.
So, I mean, a little bit of a personal, I guess, story for me, um, where, um, my grandparents, which were my mother's parents, being somebody who's overweight, that stigma follows me around, kind of everywhere. And it's not like I wake up every morning not knowing I'm overweight. Like I fully understand like when I wake up like I'm a fat guy. Like I immediately understand that.
So you're not you didn't wake up one day and say, "Hello world, I'm a fat guy and I'm ready to go." Like like that.
I mean, it's not like this, the Santa Claus where like one morning I just kind of woke up and I was like, "What is all this freaking extra weight?"
Like, holy shit, what is this?
No, I've I've been kind of like a bigger guy for a long time. And my grandparents who are not around now, and I don't want to speak ill of them, but like whenever I'd see them, going to visit them, like seeing them like shopping or in a store or whatever, there was this one thing that they always used to tell me and it has stuck with me even today. And it's created like such a stigma for me. One particular instance, like I was going to Ames, which is, kind of this old shopping department store, sort of like Walmart, just older than that, I guess.
Well, I know what Ames is,
Yeah.
but for the viewers that don't, yes, it's similar to that.
So when I was going in, like they were obviously there, and I went over, I said hello, and then my grandfather turns to me and he says, "Hey Matt, I got this new exercise for you. It's called push the plate away." And instantly when he said I had this new exercise for you, that is instantly like kind of when my brain started tuning it out and the walls started going up, because that's instantly what my brain does, because I knew exactly where he was headed with it. But it was just the fact that, like, push the plate away. Like, I got to be overweight because I just sit in front of a TV and gourd myself with Twinkies and snowballs. You
I
know
mean,
what I
that
mean?
sounds like
Like,
a good time though in some ways, but I mean, I understand what you're saying though.
yeah,
Uh,
not every overweight person over indulges.
right, and I mean, there's so many things that could, like medically speaking, that could change a person's body. I know my wife and I, we've even talked about this, but like, unfortunately for females, is PCOS, right? So
Yeah.
if you don't know what that is, basically it's a cyst on your ovaries, and it's really hard, of course, to have babies. And there's also complications where estrogen doesn't get enough into your body, and it tends to make it harder for women to lose weight, and it kind of keeps it like that. And that's the problem is like, I love my wife no matter what she looks like, and you know I understand, she's a bigger woman, but you know what, I don't care. Like that's to me, like, I don't care because I love her for who she is. But like, that's a prime example of, how women, get shamed because, they can't look like the models or
Yeah.
these beautiful women. It's like, unfortunately, not everyone's all the same, and that's where that stigma, this like little thing we gotta, deal with now.
Yeah. And just being overweight, like I said, that stigma is like, oh, you must be just eating way too much, or I could sit there, and it's not like yes, could I eat better? I think every single person on this planet could eat better, but you know what? Like, at the end of the day, like, I could eat 2,000 calories a day and drink all the water that I need to, and I still gain weight. And that's not even like eating like a whole bunch of just crappy food. It's like eating salads and chicken and, eating relatively healthy enough and not, overindulging too much. My body just gains that weight.
And that's part of the
And
issue.
that's like the problem, where I'm not just sitting there eating, 6,000 calories because I'm eating like cupcakes and I'm buying like all this, like, cookies, and I'm eating like a tub of ice cream every single night. And
I mean, when you and I were working together, eh, we I think we overdid it some nights. But I mean, I do understand, like, it's balancing that diet. And even you're right. I mean, sometimes you can do everything right, you can have everything, planned out and everything else, but you have to think about what exactly
yeah,
is causing that issue. And like, people on the outside are just like, oh, well, this guy's a lazy
they
piece of
just,
crap.
yeah, they just don't bother asking questions. They just go ahead and make that judgment like, oh, if you just stop freaking eating, you won't be fat anymore.
Well,
It's
yeah,
like,
because,
well, if I stop eating, then sure, but I'm not also not going to be healthy.
well, fun fact, even if you stopped eating, guess what? What's the first thing to go? It's not fat.
It's not fat, it's muscle.
Right. So muscle goes away, and then eventually it goes fat. But at that point, you're basically starving yourself. And yes, you would look like an anorexic patient, but like, that's where a lot of people think, oh, I'm just not going to eat. I'm like, you do need to eat. Like, you do need to have substance. You need to have all that. But like, again, having that, genetic or, medical conditions, it does play a
Yeah,
factor
there
to this
are
whole
medical
thing.
conditions, and so it's not making those snap judgments. It's like, why don't you, talk to me, ask me a question, instead of just saying like, "Oh, I got an exercise for you. It's called push the plate away." you know?
Well, I mean, I have another thing called here's my middle finger and
Yeah.
I tell you to go GFY, but yeah.
I got 3 initials for you. It's called GFY,
GFY
you
just for
know?
you. But,
But,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
um, talking more specifically on geek culture, I mean, we also talked about this in the bullying episode, where, you know, nerds, geeks, dweebs, dorks, whatever you wanna call, whatever you wanna call people in this culture, um, we've been picked on for years, and it's like the stigma that geeks and nerds and dweebs and dorks all like we've had to deal with. It's kind of all based on like the way we look, the way we dress, the way we act, and it's like the things that we're interested in.
Okay, so like, for example, right? So Matt and I, we love Marvel. We can talk Marvel for days. We could literally have conversations. I mean, that's why I wouldn't say that's like the main reason we started this podcast, but like we have that passion, we have that, thing that we have both in common. We love playing video games, we love doing, other things. And I mean, I even told him I'll even play D&D once we can, get that going at some point. But at the end of the day, yes, both Matt and I, yep, we're big guys. We got glasses. He's got a big old beard. I have a mustache and, whatever. But it doesn't mean that everyone needs to look like us. Right. So we dress a little bit differently. Right. So, Matt wears his nerdy shirts from time to time. I'll wear, kind of whatever. I mean, I'll wear probably more sporty clothes from time to time. I might throw on like some geeky stuff, but it doesn't mean that I'm less geeky than he is or vice versa or whatever, but it doesn't define, that piece of us and, the way we act. I mean, when we're both talking, yeah, we're geeking out, man. We're nerdy. We do all these things, but like when we talk to other people, yeah, we might switch it up. You may not be as geeky as we are, but we'll have conversations about maybe other things that, maybe relate to you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that when if you're a geek in, one way and you might be a nerd in another way or whatever, that you need to be, you need to act or address certain things a certain way. It doesn't matter
Yeah, I
at
mean,
the
I
end of the
think
day.
in the past, like I'm thinking back, like high school and maybe like a little bit shortly after that. Um, Actually, I don't think until generally like recently, um, I've really embraced the kind of the geekiness that is me.
Oh, wait, so you're saying that because of me, I helped you?
Probably you in the podcast,
Oh,
the
okay,
the
okay, that's good to
general,
know.
the this general thing. But like, high school, I probably was more. I mean, I obviously have been geeky my whole life, but like, I think I did more fitting in. Like, it was more of
So you're
like
conforming.
kind of that like ninja mentality where, personality wise, like I would try to fit in wherever the crowd was going, even though like internally, like I was still very much geeky, but I was always kind of with the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree because I was in that like in between. I wasn't like I played sports. I had, I was big into rap, as we all know, since he loves to just poke fun at me in high school. But
Hey, freshman, maybe sophomore year, I was big into rap. I remember having, and this is kind of maybe this is funny because the
oh wait, oh go ahead.
boss had jeans and shirts, and they actually made like a jean vest.
Oh, there you go.
So I had these like, they were black jeans made by Boss, and they were not quite the parachute pants, but they were quite wide legged. And I had the Boss vest,
Did you have a
so
chain too?
I was very much like all wrapped out.
Oh, okay. Did you
Yeah,
have like the sideways hat and
I
like
never wore a hat sideways. No,
okay. So I mean, you were getting there, but like
I was getting there.
so but I agree with you. Like I think in high school, what Matt and I are saying too is that, we both kind of like we fit into the crowd wherever we were at and we kind of just like unfortunately conformed to what was going on, but like you're right. I think as we get older, it kind of just like who cares? Like you just kind of like let it happen and then you meet people that
Well,
have
I
those
think
interests.
I think for me, like I saw, and this is kind of where that stigma applies to this is especially like I think when I was in high school, and I think like groups in high school like always kind of existed. Like when you look at the 50s and you see like the
Oh yeah,
squares, the squares and the greasers, and you
they're cliques. I mean, that's
yeah.
really what it is. But
But
yeah.
like when I was in high school, like we had you have the jocks, and then the goths,
Oh yeah.
and
Yep.
the
Yep.
and the emos. The goths and the emos were different, but they were very much the same.
And they pretty much hung out with each other. But
They
yeah.
they did. And you kind of had like I guess the in betweens, which weren't jocks, they weren't goths, they weren't emos.
They weren't bang geeks. They weren't,
Yeah,
whatever.
they weren't. They were just kind of the norms, I guess. I don't know what you call them.
The normies.
The normies. Um, but it was just that like I didn't necessarily want to just be like, hey, I'm a geek, or hey, I'm a nerd. Um, Even though I wouldn't have classified myself as a nerd back then.
But what do you think you would classify yourself as?
Probably more of a geek, although I don't know if I was so much into as much geeky stuff. I mean, obviously, video games I was always into.
Well, I think most. I
But
mean, I'm going to say it. I mean, most
comic
males.
books like
Yeah.
superheroes, that kind of stuff. But like, I don't think I was into as much stuff now as I was in then. You know
I
what I mean?
mean, especially now, there's a lot more content than there was back
There
then.
definitely is, but the overall feeling was that like when I saw like what was happening to like the goths and the emos and the amount of people like just because I'm just gonna be honest, like some of the goth people were weird. The way that they dressed and the way that they acted, like the parachute pants, those things were dresses on like for their legs. Like it was just so freaking strange and unusual. Like
Yeah, I mean, and even when I went to high school, they still did it. I mean,
yeah,
that was again, there was a gap, but I mean, people were still doing it, so it wasn't like it went away.
it was strange and unusual. But like I could see like the jocks and some of the other people, like they would viciously make fun of them. And one of our friends, you know was kicked in the head in study hall. I
What?
mean, we were kind of joking because he was one of our friends, and he was playing on his Game Boy in study hall, and one of the jocks kind of like went over and pulled the Game Boy out of his hand and slammed it on the ground. And obviously he was like, "What the hell?" And
Let me guess, he went to go pick it up, and then
this kid roundhoused him right in the head, and we were all like, our jaws hit the floor because I mean, this kid roundhoused our friend who was a goth directly in the head. So obviously we're like, holy shit, like
this is crazy. But no, but like I mean, and unfortunately, like it's. I mean, no offense. I mean, if I were you back then, I would have been like, "Yo, asshole! Like, let's talk for a minute." I mean, granted, I say this now, but like back then, I probably would have been like, I would have internalized it, and I never would have done anything. And I'll admit that, and that's the problem. It's like we don't
oh,
stand
I
up.
certainly was not doing
Well,
anything. I
no,
I was
yeah.
sitting there going, this is hilarious, but I don't want any part of this. So I'm just going to sit here and continue studying.
Well,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it was the sheep mentality. Like you just kind of, you don't want to be a part of it. But that's the problem with like nowadays. It's like as kids, unfortunately, you don't you don't think it's you don't think it's funny until it happens to you, right? Because
Yeah.
unfortunately, like you'll think it's hilarious if it's someone else, but like that's the problem with nowadays, where we do need more people to be like, you know what, I don't care. Hey, asshole, I need to talk to you for a minute. Like if I would have had the courage that I do now back then, oh man,
Oh,
I would
yeah,
have been a
certainly.
totally different person. Like just like you would have been a totally different person.
Yeah, certainly. And it's just like that type of behavior only because like he looked different, he acted different. He was playing a Game Boy during, study hall, and they were making fun of him the whole time, and they just thought it would be funny if he, took it out of his hand and broke it. And that was the whole gag of the whole thing. And when, my friend stood up and was like, I mean, he was devastated over this thing breaking, and was, confronting him on it. Like he decided it would be funny to also roundhouse kick him in the head, which in the moment it was kind of funny, but we were kind of like, oh shit, like that really just
Yeah.
happened. Like
I just think that,
it
you know,
just
with
it creates that level of like isolation of like, no, I'm just gonna keep to myself and be with the crowd. That way there I can blend in and nobody really knows what's going on with me or what I really am. And I can kind of do what the geeky stuff maybe at home or
well, so really, like, you know, when we just talked about normies, right? So like when we use the word normal, what is normal? Like what is exactly normal in like society depending on when you grew up, right? So like I would say nowadays like geekiness, it probably is like one of the coolest things you can be now. Depending on where, where you go and things like that, but like I don't think it's, the opposite of what
well,
what used
and
to be.
when we define geekiness too, I mean, there's not. I mean, everybody kind of thinks like, oh, if you're a geek, then you like superheroes or sci-fi. No, that's not. That's not. I mean, it has something to do with it.
But
But
that's
like when
yeah.
you look at geeks, like you can enjoy guns and you can geek out over them. What does that make you? It makes you a geek.
Right. Or you can be a fisherman and you just love fishing all the time,
And you look at baits and you look at fishing poles and you know if you talk to somebody who is a fisherman and you're like, hey, what is this bait? And they can tell you exactly what type it is, like what it does in the water.
You're a
That's
nerd.
a geek
I
and
mean, well,
probably a nerd
it's
too.
probably
But
gonna be
like
more of a nerd, but yeah.
the component of being a geek is there is a collector aspect of being a geek. So that's like, you're talking fishermen, you're talking guns, cars, motorcycles, like your car enthusiast, your motorcycle
Yeah.
enthusiast, like there's no clear definition of what a geek isn't.
Right. So it almost feels like geek and normal could almost coincide with one another because there is no real definition of what makes a geek. We only use that stigma, since this is the episode, to define that particular set of, let's
Yeah.
say, people or something like that. But like at the end of the day, normally, like normal average people, I mean, no offense, you're boring. Like I'm gonna admit it right now because you don't have any interest, you don't have any things that make you unique as an
You
individual.
freaking normies.
You normies, but like at the end of the day, it's like, when you look at, the different, stigmas and the people, it, you can't really define it as a label. I think that's really what it is. You can't be using labels because we have multiple labels. I mean, think about it. Like, I'm a husband, I'm about to be a father, I'm a brother, I'm a son. I'm all these different things. I wear different hats all the time and I have different, jobs and things.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always define me as a person. I mean, those are just multiple things that I have in my
Those
life.
are your roles.
Right, but like but as the stigma, right? So okay, yeah, you'd be like, "Oh, look, there's a tall goofy white guy who's, with a mustache and he's got glasses and, he's walking towards me." Like you just named quite a few people. Like I don't know who exactly, but you probably have named quite a few.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, right? So it you can't define that person because of what the stigma is saying versus, realizing that hopefully as a person that you'll have, more things that you can bring to the table. Like, so if you're a geek, so what? Okay, you know what? If you're an addict, I mean, okay, you know what? Fine. If you admit that and you want to get the help, then go for it, man. Like, don't think that it's a shaming factor.
Yeah. So let's kind of flip the script on this and talk a little bit about how we can overcome this thing that we're talking about, stigmas.
Oh, stigma. Oh, okay, gotcha.
So the first thing is like you need to have a better understanding for the people around you. You know what I mean? Like if you don't know, you're seeing maybe somebody, you're going to Walmart or whatever, and like you're seeing somebody, like don't make that snap judgment. Maybe like go up to them and ask them,
Like, hey, man,
ask a
what's up?
question.
Like, what are you doing? I'm just lurking through the, the spaces through, Walmart, just kind of looking around or whatever. I'm just kind of bored. But you're right. I mean,
Don't assume like you can't just make that assessment. Like if somebody is like laying on the ground with like a blanket and a bag, like right outside Walmart, they may be homeless. I don't know.
Or right, or maybe like I said,
Maybe they actually need help, but nobody out of the 1,000 cars that are sitting in the parking lot, you may be the very first person that has actually walked up to them and said, "Hey, sir, are you okay? Do you need assistance? Do you need me to get you a water?" Like, think about it rationally. Like, out of the thousands of people that actually shopped at Walmart, this guy could have been there for 3 days and nobody probably walked up to him. And you could be the very first person that actually would have gone up to him and said, "Hey, I can get you some water if you need it."
right. I mean, in just sitting there and just assuming that, okay, yep, he's probably homeless, or he's,
Like,
I don't know,
it's
drunk
just
off his butt or whatever.
some homeless bum. Like, if I just give him money, he's just gonna buy some booze anyways. Like,
Right.
I'm not even gonna bother.
You're right. I mean, it's really knowing the surroundings and understanding, like, the awareness of what exactly is going on, because there's so many things that go on, and we just tend to forget, or we tend to really just say, you know what, I'm only worried about myself.
Yeah,
Because I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I've done it. I mean, I've seen people, and I mean, and unfortunately, I've made those judgments, and I realize that it's tough because unfortunately, we've had so much stigmas in our society that you just, unfortunately, it's an asset of you and me, the assuming
right.
part of
It
it.
just comes naturally, and I think one of the biggest ones is sometimes you just have to mind your own damn business, right, John? Like,
Oh yeah, you
s-
definitely. Depending, those Karens out there, mind your own damn business. All right,
sometimes you just have to shut up, look straight, and keep moving. Like, worry about number one, and that's
you.
yourself.
I mean,
Don't not to cut you off, but
oh sorry.
it's you need to stop worrying about everybody else and everybody else's problems. You need to focus on yourself and focus on your problems and not judge everybody else around you. Just shut the hell up and keep moving.
I mean, what I was also gonna say is right. The only way to help others is really to help yourself, right? And so if you start judging other people, so like I say, I'll say it, those Karens, man. You need to realize that you have some issues going on. So you know what? Maybe work on those issues before you start judging other people. So like you go to fast food restaurants, you go to whatever, and you make those quick judgments on those people. Like why are they working at McDonald's, or why are they I don't know, like working as a bartender at some bar or whatever. Like who cares? They have their own problems. They have their own life.
Right.
So shut the hell up and move on.
Yeah.
But I will say this, Matt, since you interrupted me a second ago. No, I'm only kidding. So, um, so the next one, go above and beyond to show support and be excited for those around you. So
That's a big one.
that is a bad one. And Matt, sometimes I feel like you lack in this one, just a smidge, just a smidge for me at least. Just throwing it out there.
I'm not big in my outward emotions,
No,
John,
no, I'm
but
kidding. I'm
I
kidding. But
mean,
go ahead.
this is a big one, and you know, the people that who do suffer from like mental health issues or an addiction or yeah, fill in the blank, like show support for treatment, show advocate for them, be their cheerleader. Like if you know somebody who you know suffers from a mental health condition, they're going to treatment or they want to go to treatment, like be their cheerleader. Like tell them how good treatment would be instead of judging them and or completely ignoring them. Like,
So, like for example, and it's a little quick story, but um, so maybe some of you probably haven't know this, but I am in the military. Okay. Um, the thing is that there were quite a few people that didn't believe that I could actually do it. Okay, I understand it's a little different from what we're talking about, but I mean it is a stigma in some ways. And a lot of people doubted why I wanted to join, and I remember even family members saying to me, "Well, that's a dumb reason." So I wanted to go to school. I wanted to make sure my education was covered, and so I told them like, "Hey, I want to go to school, but I also want to, maybe serve my country for a little bit different reasons." And they said, "Oh, you can pay for college." And I looked at them and I said, "This isn't the 1970s. There's no way in hell I can pay for college. What are you out of your mind?" And so unfortunately, like their daughter, who is my cousin, um, she got a full ride scholarship to one of the best schools in New England. It was Bentley University, and I was like, "Holy crap, that's amazing!" But like, that's not me. Like, you know what I mean? And so when I said, "Hey, I'm going to do this," and I mean, unfortunately, it was one of those things that I I hated doing, but like I had to prove people wrong. Like it's also showing them that if you can, give the support, then hopefully you taking it, you can prove those people like, hey, you know what, I understand I may be an addict or I'm just, let's say, joining the military or I'm doing something else. Like it, you need to advocate for yourself and also say, you know what, I can do this. And having that determination and that willpower, because and unfortunately it's one of the hardest things. So when you hear people saying like all these negative connotations,
Yeah.
it is tough to deal with and keep going. But if you say, you know what, I'm gonna prove somebody wrong, guess what? You're willing to go the further step because of this.
It's really one of the I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny, in that regard, but it's really one of those weird things that we do where we keep saying like, "I really want so and so to change." And then every interaction you have with them, you create that stigma because it's such a negative conversation where it's exactly, that or you're saying like, something like, if you're, say your son or daughter, whatever, is an addict,
Right.
and you're like, I really want them to change. I really want them to, get clean and sober. And then every single interaction you have with them is like, oh, you're just an addict and you're never, how do you expect them to do anything?
Right. And how do you want them to act towards you? Because what if you were flipped in roles, reverse roles? What if they did that to you? How would you feel?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So no matter which way you look at it, I don't care if it was me or somebody else, like if it was my son or whatever. I would hope not, but you know, I'm hoping that if you're going to treat me one way, then guess what? It's probably going to happen on the reverse side of
And
things.
it usually does. And that's why, I think with this one, like being their cheerleader, showing a little positivity, especially coming from, a loved one or, a friend,
I got you, man.
it goes a long way. When you're being positive towards somebody who's dealing with, a real serious mental health condition and you're, really talking up like treatment and going to counseling and even saying like, "Hey, if you want me to go with you, I will go with you. Like if you need support, I will go with you. Whatever you need." Like that goes a long way.
Right. And that's where, when you look at friends and, the ones you can count on, like that's where you really need to kind of evaluate. Like, and we mentioned this before in some of the previous ones, but like, you need to realize, like, the people that you love and the people that, you feel close to and you trust, make sure they're in your corner all the time, not ever like only here and there, right? Because, like, at the end of the day, if like you have a serious issue, you want them by your side. And if you're not getting the right help, again, maybe it's time to reevaluate some things and be like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be hanging out with these people because of maybe the stigmas or some of the other things that
Yeah.
make it harder for that. And the one other thing, so for those suffering,
Yeah.
right?
So these people, if you're dealing with, stigmas in your life, um,
Oh, okay, I got
you
you.
you can obviously do the first one, but
Oh, okay.
these next few ones, like if you're dealing with like a lot of stigmas in your own life, these are some tips that you can use to, kind of help deal with them.
Right. So the first one, I kind of mentioned this already, but don't isolate yourself, right? So like what I mean by that is more like, okay, don't just mope around. Don't be that lazy guy sitting on the couch playing a video game. Matt, just kidding. I'm
Hey,
kidding. I'm kidding. Because I'll do the same thing. But don't be that person that just thinks that um, I have to be alone in order to figure this out. You don't. Like, you know what? That's probably the worst way you can think because there are
right.
other people that either one you can connect with. So talking to the right people, you might even have friends who maybe even feel the same way. So wait, what's that called? Communication, right? And having that conversation. So instead of always feeling the need to text people, maybe having a conversation like Matt and I are doing right now, having a real conversation is important, right? So we forget that social media and, all these other things that have consumed our lives, like it does not mean that you have to, I got to talk to you on the phone. Like, no, be a real person. Go hang out with people. Go explore. Go do other things. And at the end of the day, having, oop, sorry, uh, having that mentality of like it can't hurt. If people are not around me, and not having that connection. If that's really how you think, then I'm sorry, man. Like, I'm pretty sad for you because like
It's gonna
that's
make
not
things a lot worse.
right. And unfortunately with life, I just don't think that people think that some people are maybe okay with being alone and being that weird cat lady that lives on the end of the street. Like, you know what, go for it if that's what you want to do. But at the end of the day, I think people truly, in some ways, they they almost it's like there's a feeling of like they need social interaction. Like there are times like I understand we have, are people who are very like, introverted and there's extroverted, but like even the introverts, they do need some social interaction, even though they don't want it all the time, but they do need something from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely say like I'm extremely introverted.
I've had to get them out of a shell, but yes.
So yeah, for me, like I can be social in small, small
Gatherings, yeah.
segments.
Yep.
And there are times when I do like just to be quiet and no interactions whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, I do agree. I think humans were created for connection. There has to be a connection. We we shouldn't expect to just be alone, forever.
Right. And there's no reason why you can't like go find a buddy, go, you know what, go hang out with that drunk. Maybe
Yeah.
he'll tell you some good stories. Who knows? But
Get out and do stuff. The next one, educate your friends and family. We kind of did touch on this, kind of briefly, but you can join support groups. You can invite, your friends or family, to, counseling or treatment and have them, sit in with you. Obviously, it wouldn't be every time, but like you can have them join you, even if you do like family counseling.
right. And I'm actually gonna flip it for a second, but like let's say, you are a geek, right? And you're like, you know what, I don't know, if my family really likes, video games or whatever. Okay, you know what? Here, ready, try this. Sit down, you play the game or whatever, see if they like it. If they do, okay, give them the controller and say, "Oh, I don't know what I'm doing." Well, let me teach you. Like, you know what I mean? So it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean you have to go, get the help and the therapy in that sense. But if you have different like hobbies or different things like that that maybe are considered more geekier than others, go have them try it with you. Like the worst they can say is no, clearly, but like there's no reason why they can't, at least try it once. And if it's not their thing, whatever, but at least they understand like what makes you excited and have that passion for it.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest piece to this is giving them like, providing, not giving them really, but providing them like the education and giving them like a better understanding of what you're dealing with, whether it's mental health, whether it's an addiction, whether it's the bullying or whatever it is, being
Right.
overweight, like
Yeah.
whatever your struggle is and whatever that stigma is, providing them with that understanding is going to be that key of educating your friends and family so that they have that understanding of like, this is what's going on with me. So I need you to understand like when you're saying this or acting this way towards me, it hurts.
Right. And realizing that labels, based on these stigmas aren't always the best answer. And so, understanding that, okay, you know what, like what Matt was just saying, like, okay, you know what, I am an addict. And, yes, I've done, let's say, 5 years of just straight up heroin. And, I did a couple years of, drinking alcohol, whatever. Right. You know, having them understand of maybe even, maybe you don't have to go into full detail, but like maybe understanding of, you know, the reasoning, of why it happened that way because like they might think, "Oh, well, you could have asked for help." And I'm like, "Maybe you were the issue." Unfortunately, like maybe there was other things that were going on that, they couldn't talk to you because they knew that there was going to be some sort of, judgment,
Yeah.
disgrace, shame, whatever. And it makes it harder for them to want to talk to you about it. So like, don't think that, when they ask for you to join like, some kind of therapy session or whatever, it doesn't mean that you need to be there to be judging. It's more for you to understand, where they're at and
where
where they're
they're yeah,
coming
where
from.
they're at and where they're coming from. And if your friends are the people you're using with,
Oh,
or
right. Yeah. Now,
they're
clearly,
they're contributing, or you feel like you can't go to your family because they've contributed to mental health, whether it's been from abuse or some kind of trauma. Going to a support group and or finding somebody that you can trust and talk to, that's like the key.
right.
Like,
It's finding those individuals
you
you can
need
talk
to
to.
find somebody that you can talk to, you can trust, to have that relationship with, to say, I need somebody that can understand me so that I can dump some of this stuff out on.
Right.
But it's not going to be my friends or my family because, well, I used with some of these guys, and my family, well, they're part of the reason. So you need to find somebody that you can trust that's not going to continue that stigma.
Yeah. I mean, and following on that is, you are not your illness or addiction, right? So again, it's that labeling piece. You're not defined as that, right? So I'm blank. Or, instead of saying that, you could say I have blank, right? So again, understanding that yes, I have an addiction to blank, or I have, a mental health issue with this, or what, whatever it is, but like understanding like it's not like I'm, bipolar or I'm this. Like, no, it's understanding that
I have
I have
bipolar.
this.
Yeah.
It's
Not
so
I am bipolar. You're not a mental condition.
right. And understanding that, like an addict or a mental health, you know, patient or whatever the case is, right? It does not mean that, okay, you know what? If I have schizophrenia and I have bipolar, that, yep, I'm a schizophrenic and I am a bipolar person, or whatever. It's just realizing that you live with a condition and you are learning how to at least cope with it and understanding that again, it's not that defining label, it's not that defining issue. It's it's learning how to create a basically an environment for yourself to feel as normal as you can be, or at least as normal as you would like to be, right? Because unfortunately, you can't do certain things depending on where you're at and wherever conditions you have. But the only thing you can do, and probably like just like the other two we've mentioned, like educate, like
Yeah.
and do all these other things because that's really how you're gonna maybe help change, people's perspective or maybe in your own views on what you have or what is going on.
Well, and it's really like a personalization, kind of, I guess, humanization, which might be another episode that we can
Oh,
do.
humanization. All right.
Um, where we tend to humanize everything in society nowadays, where we kind of like almost humanize mental health,
Yeah.
where you know oh, I'm bipolar, so it's just my personality now. No, that's not. No, it's not like your pet that you carry in your purse. It should never be that.
Right. And it's not even, when we look at like you we were just mentioning the dog in your purse. I don't know why I just started laughing at that, but like it's
Because it's stupid and
I mean, it
ridiculous.
is
Yeah,
really
yeah,
stupid and ridiculous, but I think you're right. I think it's just, realizing that, we are who we are. And yes, do we tend to make it more, again, humanized, right? And make it more relatable? I guess really that's what it is making more relatable to a situation. Sure. But that's not always the case. It shouldn't be always the case in that,
yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, I know. We do tend to humanize everything, and the I don't know. This is kind of a side thing, but where this would be a more topic for another day would be the humanization aspect. Like, why do we name hurricanes?
You're right. I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like, but it's just that aspect of like humanizing like addiction and humanizing mental health, and even like being overweight. Like, I'm overweight. Like, that's me, like owning it. Like, obviously I can't say I have overweight because
I
that's
mean,
an
that makes no sense. Like I have overweight, like, whoa, wait,
but I have weight problems.
Right. Right. And it's
I have
also the wording you're
yeah,
using.
I have weight issues, but I am not my weight problem. Like
Right.
it's not who I am. And you have to define who you are with the understanding like yes, obviously you do have a weight problem or you do have bipolar or you do have fill in the blank, but you have to define who you are
Such
without that problem defining who you are. Because as soon as you put I am bipolar, anything that you put after that no longer matters.
so I was gonna say before we go on, what wise words you've mentioned, man. Look at you.
I
Mr.
know.
Proverb,
You know,
Mr. Prophet, and everything else. But I'm just saying it was good. I like how you did that. But I'll end it with this, right? Get treatment, right?
mm,
So it's seeking that help. It's being motivated to go, do it because it's the right thing to do, or it's the best thing that you can do for whatever reason, fill in the blank that you're going to be doing it for. So don't think of it as a sign of weakness, right? So no matter what it is, it's not a sign of weakness. You're really just saying, hey, you know what? I want to figure this out. And how do I learn to either take it head on and maybe manage the problem, or let me rephrase this, manage the symptoms or manage certain things at a more controllable level, maybe normalize the situation as best as I can. And how do I get there? Right. So and of course, it's just building the plan. It's maintaining a routine. Like, there's so many things, but like, it's just thinking to myself, how can I get to be where I want to be at? And how can I do that? So hopefully, like I said, the previous tips that we mentioned, like, having that support system, you know, realizing that you need some social aspect in your life, and being saying, you know what, I can't isolate myself. I can't think that I'm the only one in the world that doesn't have this problem, right? Because there's
yeah.
plenty of people that have multiple issues that are probably very similar to yours, and you're just like, oh well, I guess I'm just the overweight, bipolar, alcoholic. You're like, well, you know what? You've just probably described quite a few people, and you don't even realize it, right? And so when I look at weakness, or sorry, when I look at seeking help, I look at people that are willing to take the next step and are basically saying they have the courage to go forward, admit they have a problem in some regard, right? And mostly just wanting to learn how they can, cope. How can they manage? How can they, maintain hopefully a lifestyle that they want to maintain to a normal degree, instead of just thinking, okay, you know what, man, this guy's, he's just doing it because, he realized just now that he's overweight. He's a bipolar, you know, freak, and, is an alcoholic, or sorry, a raging alcoholic. You know, so what? You know what? Maybe he understands that, but he's at least trying. He's trying to go forward and trying to, get to a point where a lot of people are just quick to judge, and they're like, "Ah, whatever. No big deal." And you're like, "No, it's everything, man. Like, you're literally defining what he's going through."
Yeah. I mean, there's tremendous strength in seeking treatment. You know, it's not a normal thing. You know, you could have 50 people who are all dealing with some kind of an addiction, and they could all be different. And I mean, I'll tell you right now, like probably one out of those 50 are actually going to seek treatment.
Right.
If there's more, I mean, if we go a little bit more liberal, John,
Uh-oh.
if we go a little bit more liberal and we say, okay, there's 10 out of 50 who will actually seek that treatment, five of those people will actually finish.
Right.
One of those 50 will actually be successful.
And that's the thing, is like,
Those are legit. I mean, there's more than 50 people in treatment within New Hampshire, but when you actually look at real statistics, that's probably, if you take 50 people, that's probably more accurate.
no, I agree. I mean, and the problem is like, I wish there were more people that are just willing to be like, you know what, I am a
Yeah.
successful treatment, you know, person, or like, individual that can do this and maintain it, and I just don't understand why people think that, okay, you know what, I'm going to go to treatment and then everything's going to be solved. Like, that's not always the case, because you may need other things. but it's for you to maintain, for you to keep up with the,
It takes work. Like,
therapy and
I
everything
mean, like
else.
we said in the addiction episode, you can go back and listen to that one. It takes work. We're obviously not going to go
Oh,
back
yes.
into
No, no,
that,
no. Yeah, of
but
course.
like, seek that treatment, go through it. Like, there's tremendous strength in that because it's going to make you a better person, a better friend, a better father, a better husband, a
Oh, thanks,
better,
Matt.
like, fill in the blank. Like, it's going to make you better in the long term. And society, yeah, society will automatically shame you with that stigma of like, oh, you're in treatment, you must have serious issues. Who cares?
And
They can mind, like I said, they can mind their own damn business.
I mean, and stop being a Karen. I mean, you got your own issues you got to deal with.
A majority of people should probably be
I mean, I agree with you.
should be in treatment. And yeah, there is a mental health crisis in America where people can't get into treatment. One, because there's not enough,
Well,
spaces, and
yeah,
two, because health insurance won't cover it.
which is sad. And it saddens me that we have all these issues, we have all these things that are causing so much, stress and pain that we're not even willing to put money towards these things because they think, oh, it's useless. It's a waste of time.
Stigma has really become like a really terrible issue.
Seriously, I mean, you know what? Maybe we should start campaigning. Stigma is, the biggest issue of all, and then be like, come fight me, bro. Like, let's see what happens.
It's become, I think, so natural that people don't think about how easy it is to do it.
Right. And I mean, we could probably even talk about maybe in another episode like stereotypes, and other things like that. Cause I mean, in some, I'm not saying always, right? But like stigmas and stereotypes, I'm not saying I mean, they are similar, but they're not like exactly the same, but they have that same connotation. They always have something towards an individual or maybe a group of people or whatever the case is. But again, as a society, we label. We don't just say, "Hey, Matt, looks like you like gaming and other things like that." But maybe he likes also, let's say, hiking and playing
I mean,
football and other things like that.
that's just another, it's just another stigma. Like, as soon as you say like, "Oh, I play video games," oh, you must just be lazy.
Right?
What about me says that I'm lazy because I play video games?
Like,
Okay, well,
or
you're just gonna stig me, you're gonna stigmatize me like that.
are you gonna stigma? What is it? Stigmata? Is that?
You're
but
gonna you're gonna stigmata.
you're gonna stigmata up in here? But like, no. But I agree. I mean, I would say probably to wrap this whole thing up is you look at stigmas. It's a pain in the ass. All right, and it's a pain where honestly where the sun don't shine. And you know what? At this point, we need to get rid of it. There's no reason to keep continuing this vicious cycle in our
Yeah.
society.
Be kind. Rewind.
You know what? There you go. Message of the day. Be kind, rewind. All right. But in closing notes here, guys, we appreciate as always, the support, the love, and everything that you guys do. Again, we have a couple people we're trying to, maybe, down the road try to, hit us up and try to do some more episodes with. So again, if you, do ever want to reach out to us, again, hit up on Linktree,
Oh,
hit
show.
our hit our website, hit us on social media, whatever the case is, right? But I'll mention this real quick. If you go to our merch store, okay, we decided to drop a football jersey. Okay. It's football season, boys and girls, if you love football. So
Uh-huh.
check it out because it's GFTM 23, man. I'm telling you, it's pretty cool. It's pretty sick. So if I were you, I'd try to get one.
Toy like a toyga.
If you want to call it toy like a toy guy, then that's on you, buddy. But I will say this: you guys are amazing. But as always,
Stay geeky.